Feel
Oh, well, no,
very
I don't want to be
successful.
treated any differently. I'm not like, I mean, I'm successful, but I'm not that famous. So it's fine.
You're from Italy, so you're going to be down to earth, aren't you?
Probably there is some sort of imposter syndrome that has never left me. Process of writing a story as something that is not necessarily making up a story, but rather unearthing.
Perhaps for books to be adapted into movies or television series.
I would love that to happen. We're actually having conversations about this now, and
Hello, welcome to Take a Wonder, Shebs. I'm very excited for this edition of my podcast to bring on a renowned best-selling author for the books Clytemnestra and Babylonia, Costanza Casati. Costanza and I actually met back in Sicily last year when we were on a work trip, and she was born in the US in Texas but grew up in northern Italy, where she studied ancient Greek and ancient Greek literature in a country where the academic was very rigorous. She's a graduate of the prestigious Warwick Writing MA in the UK and has worked as a screenwriter and a journalist. Her debut novel, Clytemnestra, has sold into 20 territories worldwide, was the winner of the Glass Bell Award, and was shortlisted for the HWA Debut Crown Award. Reading her novels, they tend to delve into historical and dystopian themes, often focusing on a strong, complex female protagonist. Babylonia, her second novel, was an instant Sunday Times bestseller. Before I go into the interview, here's how you can support the channel. You can support the channel by heading over to www.shebsthewonder.com and hover over to the store tab and click. You can then buy various items from t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, even water bottles and phone cases. If you have any questions, you can send me a message through the contact tab. Without further ado, here's my interview with Costanza Casati. Where are you? Did you say you were in Paris?
I'm in Paris, yeah, first arrondissement, which is the most amazing spot, but it is so loud, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to finish the first draft of my new novel, and I have these
Ah.
moments of like deep focus, and they're constantly being interrupted by just an ambulance passing down the street or something else. So hopefully this interview will have no interruptions because this is lunch break. So
Fine.
where are you?
Well, I'm back home at the minute. So this is my studio, and I've just come back from. Well, I was in London last week for some events and stuff. I'm actually going back again tomorrow for a couple of other events and stuff, which is good. I've not been to events for a while, but I've got a trip coming up to Greece and then Sri Lanka as well.
Amazing.
Have you been to Sri Lanka before
I've
yourself?
never been to Sri Lanka before. No, I've been to Greece many times, but never to Sri
Okay.
Lanka.
I've been to Greece many times. I've been to Greece maybe like 5 times now and
Okay.
stuff. So,
And you're going
and
to
then,
Athens or an island or?
so I'm going to Rhodes.
Oh,
So
I love
Rhodes,
Rose. It was a while back now, but I love. Yeah, it is a little bit more touristic than other
yeah.
islands, but very worth it. And I feel like if you go now, it's not as crowded as.
By the way, many people that listen to the show that won't know that we actually met in Italy because you were writing a travel piece, which many people might not know. Actually, you do writing pieces.
Yes, I do. I do. I also work in journalism. I used to work in journalism more in the past before I had my book contracts. But yeah, we met in Sicily.
We did, yeah. I can't believe it. It's actually been more than a year ago now.
I think I think it was
February,
last
wasn't it?
February. Yes.
We were there for I think it was like 5 days, and it was really, really cool. The spot that we had. We're very lucky as travel writers. They give us like the best rooms, so we had like all the spa
Our
and
rooms
stuff.
were amazing, and yeah, we
They
made the most
were,
of the spa. It was a great trip, honestly, and I think it was in the middle. It was like a break for me as well because I was in the middle of editing
yeah.
my
Did you remember
Babylonia
me that?
book. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was just 5 days of bliss.
We had to obviously write a couple of things for the
Of
for the
course. Oh no, yeah,
publications
it
and
was
stuff.
work. It was work.
It was
But
work, but
work in Sicily at the resort with the spa and
yeah,
like
but
outdoor pools, and it was amazing.
you do that work, and obviously you're writing your books and stuff. So what would you? Obviously, you love both of them, but would you like to do the travel more, or the writing books is more sort of your passion?
Yeah, yeah. For me, writing books is my number one passion, and it's kind of it was my dream job ever since I was like 5, 6 years old. So it was the thing that I always wanted to do. Then I did work in television and journalism for a little bit when I was a little bit younger. So I used to work as a screenwriter for short films and documentaries. And then I would also work for this Canadian magazine called Horror Magazine. I did both press trips, so travel writing, but also I covered the Venice Film Festival. So I would do reviews of films and TV series and stuff like that. So I think it's good to have that balance. But yeah, writing books remains my first love and my full-time job now.
Which is great, by the way, because remember I remember when we met, you were telling me how it works with if you get one book commissioned, if it does well, which is obviously it has done, by the way, you're best-selling author, then you get more and more, and then it becomes more. Which is, by the way, I'm in awe of what you've done. It's amazing your achievements well, obviously since we met, but we kept in touch and stuff. But it's great to see how well you've done, and Babylonia's done amazing, by the way. So it's
Yes, it
congratulations
has.
on that.
Thank you. Thank
And
you. No, I'm really proud.
I have to also admit, I remember going to the trip, and there were people there who were really excited to meet you at the time, and
That is true.
I don't remember because I don't really necessarily read novels, so, but they were very excited. I was like, they're excited for who? It's like who? I was like, wow, okay. So I had to look you up. It's like, oh wow, you are huge, and I didn't. But I tend to sort of take everyone as every day, so I don't tend to treat anyone differently. So if you're
Oh, well, no,
very
I don't want to be
successful.
treated any differently. I'm not like, I mean, I'm successful, but I'm not that famous. So it's fine.
You're from Italy, so you're gonna be down to earth, aren't you?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I do write in my second language, so probably there is some sort of imposter syndrome that has never left me, as much as I try to leave that behind. But I do feel this because in the publishing business, in the publishing industry, I am not the only one necessarily, but one of the few authors who write in their second language. And I feel like I've
Yeah.
always been hyper aware of this. And it's something that kind of hits me as I do events. And people never notice this, by the way. Like they know I'm from Italy, but they think that because I was born in the US, then
Yeah.
I am one of those, Italian Americans who don't really speak Italian, but Italian is my first language. And
Yes.
I used to be ashamed of it. I used to try to kind of hide it simply because I knew how hard it was to get an agent or to have a career in the publishing industry if you were not a native speaker. But now, because I feel like I earned my place at the table,
Yeah.
I like to talk about it, and I'm not ashamed of this anymore. But probably this is also why I'm so down to earth, because I
Yeah.
have these moments when I keep thinking, is this real? How did this happen to me? And I know how it happened because I worked really, really hard, but
Of course.
I still feel that imposter syndrome a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
That's interesting. What you said there, that you felt as though you had to hide your Italian if your native language isn't English. You, as you said there, you were born in Texas. I know that.
I was born in Texas, yeah.
But you lived you grew up in Italy, so you are Italian. Do you remember Tabby? I'm sure she won't mind because she is British. Well, it was funny because we were asking her because her parents are English, but she was born in Italy, but she speaks in English. So I was asking her, how are you Italian or are you English? Because she was raised in Italy, she says she feels Italian because with the mindset, with British parents, yeah, but she's got that Italian mindset.
Yes, and I think she's both. Like I remember, I was talking to her about this as well, and she identifies as Italian but British. And I think what makes the difference is the fact that she grew up with a British family. So yes, the
Yeah.
setting was Italian, whereas I grew up in Italy with an Italian family.
Family.
So I kind of did. Obviously, once I started learning English, it did come easily to me because I spent like 2 years when I was, my first 2 years of life in the US. So it was easy for me to learn English, but I had to learn the language, I
Of
feel.
course.
Whereas Tabby, now we're talking about Tabby. she,
I
that,
think you won't mind.
she won't mind, but she grew up speaking English, and you can tell because she has a very British accent. Her accent is like lovely to listen to. Whereas I feel a slight Italian accent, not too strong compared to, you've met many Italian people who speak English with a strong Italian accent because
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
traveled so much.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I have a little bit of an accent still, and I don't mind it anymore. As I said, I don't try to hide it anymore.
You mentioned about your background. Yeah. How did your writing then, your influence, so your writing style then, in terms of your novel?
Yeah, I think more than the Italian language necessarily, what influenced me the most in terms of my writing was my background in classics. Because growing up in Italy, I attended this school that we call Liceo Classico, which is basically a high school where classics are compulsory. So growing up from the age of 14, I studied ancient Greek language and literature as well as Latin. And that is how I became familiar with, the Greek myths and the ancient Greek tragedies. And I feel like this background really informed my not only my writing in terms of content, but my writing style as well. Obviously, my first novel, Clytemnestra, is about Greek mythology. But also when it came to the style of that novel, I was really influenced by the ancient Greek tragedies and the ancient Greek poets. And then something else that influenced me, kind of going back to working in TV and journalism, I think when it comes to the style of my books, having worked as a script writer does have an effect because I am both as a reader and as a writer, I am obsessed with what I call the perfect simple sentence. I do love a style that is simple but quite lyrical. And I think having worked in television as a script writer really helped because I cannot write in a flowery style. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I love, reading novels that have very complicated sentences, but I'm quite obsessed with plot and character first and foremost, and trying to write in a style that really packs a punch. So I think, yeah, I think those two things influenced me the most: script writing and my background in classics.
Most important thing is you've done some screenwriting beforehand, you've done journalism before, so you knew how to write. It wasn't like you got into, just many people that I know have gone into writing books without having knowledge of writing. But have you ever had sort of like moments where a historical fact, because a lot of it is it's fictional, but there's a lot of historical facts. I'm assuming you've taken a lot of historical facts from history too, but any historical facts that completely change the direction of your story, would you say?
I love this question, and I think yes, this happens all the time. Um, Philip Pullman and also Stephen King talk about this so wonderfully when they talk about the process of writing a story as something that is not necessarily making up a story, but rather unearthing facts, historical facts that then allow you to create your own story. And I love this image of facts being buried under the earth and the authors being these kind of archaeologists with scalpels trying to find the right facts. And I have so many examples of this, but just to give you one example that is related to my first novel, Clytemnestra, and this is not necessarily an historical fact, but it is a fact that came out during my research. So Clytemnestra she's one of the most infamous, just for context, figures from Greek mythology, and she's very famous in the Greek myth for killing her husband Agamemnon when he came back from the Trojan War. And this is quite well known as a fact in Greek mythology. But what many people do not know is that she was married before Agamemnon. She was married to this king called Tantalus. They had a baby together, and then Agamemnon, and this is not a spoiler because it's the myth, Agamemnon came and killed Clytemnestra's first husband and her baby. And I was not aware of this up until a few years before writing the novel. Even if I had studied Clytemnestra's myth when I was younger, I didn't know this. And then I came across this fact and I realized that my novel had to include this, and that this kind of family that Clytemnestra had with this man, with this king, before Agamemnon came and destroyed everything, was going to be a huge part of my story, of my plot. So this is just one example, but I do feel like writing is really about being surprised by historical facts all the time, and I love that part of the process.
Has travel influenced some of your writing style as well? Because that's one question that I was quite curious to know. You've traveled quite a bit around the world, and you've also lived in London as well when you studied in London. Has that influenced your writing as well?
I think specifically in the case of Clytemnestra, yes, 100% yes, because I have been to Greece many, many times.
Mm.
And I've been to many Greek islands. I've been to Athens, and Clytemnestra is a very I wanted Clytemnestra to be a very atmospheric novel. I wanted the setting to be such an important part of the book. And the first part of the book is set in Sparta, ancient Sparta, which is its own kind of setting, such a specific.
I was actually in Sparta actually recently.
Yes, yeah, and you
It's
know
really good.
how
Yeah.
specific it is, right? In
Yeah.
terms of how the land is and the heat and the colors. It's such a peculiar, I would say, setting. And so I think having traveled in Greece so much really helped when it came to writing Clytemnestra. Sadly, my second book is set in ancient Mesopotamia, and I couldn't travel because this is modern day Iraq, Iran. So those are areas where it's not easy to travel nowadays. I would have loved to go there, but I did a lot of research into museums, things like bas reliefs, and I read a lot of proverbs, love poems. I did a lot of research that I would call more academic, whereas for Clytemnestra, my research was more, I want to say, travel based, because I was already familiar with the classics, and so I could focus on the setting and the atmosphere and the colors and the food and all of that. So yeah, it does. Travel does influence my writing in a way that is not necessarily conscious. It's not that I decide to go there and study a place so then I can write about it, but having been to that place helps.
And your second book, you've written your second book, Babylonia, is fantastic. How did it differ from Clytemnestra? Did you approach the research differently compared to? I know you just said that you couldn't travel to certain destinations, but did you approach it differently compared to your first one?
Yes, it was so different. And this is mainly because, as I said before, with Clytemnestra, I was already familiar with most of the myths and the tragedies and the ancient Greek texts because I had studied them for a few years, for many years before writing the novel. With Babylonia, I had to start from scratch. And so it was fascinating, but also very challenging. I had to research not just ancient Assyria, because the novel is set in the world of ancient Mesopotamia, but specifically ancient Assyria, because it tells the story of this woman, Semiramis, who was the first and only female ruler of the Assyrian Empire. So I had to do so much research, both before, during, and after writing the book. Even when I was editing, I kept doing research, just to give you an idea. And when I do research, I do two types of research. One is what I call the academic research. So I did a lot of reading into the more practical aspects of ancient Mesopotamia. So things like food recipes and proverbs and the structure of palaces, the kind of training that these people did, the life that the kings would have lived, and where did they sleep, and how did they bathe, did they have soap, like that sort of thing. And then there is the other kind of research that I did for Babylonia, which is to me the most important part of research, the cultural research. So the type of research that allows an author, a writer, to immerse themselves into the mindset of the people and to understand how they thought about love and death and grief and how they viewed the word, essentially, through what lenses did they view the word. And I think this was the most fascinating part of the research for me. And it is really about reading ancient epics and myths. And there was one text in particular that really helped me, which is the oldest epic ever written, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And it's a text that is referenced in Babylonia many times. And it's a fascinating epic about love in the face of loss. And so thematically, the book is also inspired by things like the Epic of Gilgamesh or many other epics and myths. So it was a very different research process when it came to writing Babylonia, 100%, yeah.
And your characters are, well, when I read your first book and your second book, that there's deep trauma. It's shaped by trauma, the survival. But how do you balance sort of historical accuracy with making their emotions relatable to the modern audience anyway?
I think this is a great question that people don't often ask, but it's such an important question because I have this deep belief, I strongly believe that so many things have changed throughout history. The mindset has changed, but there are so many feelings that stay the same. When we read ancient epics like the Epic of Gilgamesh that I just mentioned, and we see the main character Gilgamesh crying when his best friend slash lover dies, we understand that grief. It is the kind of grief that we ourselves feel when we lose a loved one. When we read the Iliad, the love between Achilles and Patroclus, or the anger of Achilles, those are feelings that are human and that are universal. So I do think that this is something that books can really do. They can show, especially historical novels, they can show us that so many things have changed, but others say the same. And I think it is the job of an author, a job of a writer, to really show these feelings and make them and show how universal they are. But it is also true that the mindset changes, right? The mindset of the people, based on the culture and the setting and the period in history changes. So it is, for me, it's really about finding those moments of continuity. But just to give you an example, a more practical example, Babylonia has featured some very violent sequences. There are a couple of war scenes and war sequences that can be traumatizing, I think. And this is not I didn't want necessarily to include those sequences in the novel, but I had to, because ancient Assyrian culture was very warlike. It was very violent, right? They had these showcases of violence as propaganda. So I had no choice but to include those scenes. And I think there's sometimes this notion that ancient people were so used to violence that they were this sense that they just didn't feel kind of trauma in the same way that we do. But that isn't true. There are so many sources that tell us that actually they did feel pain just like we do. It's just that they were not necessarily used to it. They just felt more pain because they were constantly at war. And there is an example actually that really helped me. There is a source that really helped me when it came to writing those battle sequences in Babylonia. There's this ancient Mesopotamian tablet. This is a very specific example, but I thought it could work for your question. There's this ancient tablet that showcased this kind of change, how the mind of this king changed after he went to battle. And he was an Assyrian king who went to battle, then came back home, and he just couldn't talk, couldn't feel things as he used to. And obviously, we know now that that's an example of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Obviously, the ancients wouldn't have called it PTSD, but that's what it was. And this kind of shows you that the consequences of war throughout history are always the same.
If you were to time travel and meet Clytemnestra and Semiramis, what question would you actually ask them?
This is a very difficult question, I think, because they're both very ambitious characters, right? They're both very driven, and they both ask questions about female power in the ancient world. I think the main question would be, are you happy? Was it all worth it? Because they sacrificed so much to get into positions of power. And then more specific questions for the two characters. For Semiramis, I would say, I would ask something about love, like, is there a character that you really loved? And this is because in Babylonia, the story is Semiramis' story, but it is also the story of this tragic love triangle that made her queen. And this is not like your traditional love triangle, right? The love triangle in Babylonia doesn't have two male characters fighting over a woman, but rather it's a love triangle where every single character in different moments of the book is in love with the others. So it's almost a throuple in a way. But yes, I would ask her about love and if there is anyone that she truly loved. And then for Clytemnestra, maybe something about vengeance. Was vengeance truly worth it? Was it really satisfying? Because vengeance in ancient Greece was, a moral obligation. It was almost like justice. They had a very different view of vengeance. But yeah, she made vengeance her main purpose in life. So I guess my question would be, did it give you any satisfaction?
And with the success of your books, has there been talks perhaps, and you want perhaps the books to be adapted into movies or television series, or are you not too concerned about that? You're just doing what you can do, and then if it happens, it happens.
I would love that to happen. We're actually having conversations about this now and starting to think, like, if it did happen, who would you want, to work with, and that sort of thing. I think Clytemnestra would be much easier to adapt because it is you could read that book as a family saga, essentially.
Mm.
And there is a lot of intimacy to it. And yes, it is an epic story, but not as epic as Babylonia. It doesn't have these huge battle sequences and stuff like that. So I think you could almost adapt that book as one of the early seasons of Game of Thrones, you know, a lot of plotting, a lot of family drama. And Babylonia, I think, would work as a TV series because it is more epic in scale. And it has more perspective, so it would need to follow more characters and all their different storylines. But I would absolutely love that, and because I have worked as I said before, I have worked as a script writer. Even as I wrote these books, I couldn't help but picture them as movies in my head. Maybe every author does this. I don't know.
Is that what you sometimes picture when you're writing a book? Do you see the long-term vision, thinking, okay, I'm writing a book now, hopefully it does well, but then hopefully it's made into a movie as well, or a television series?
I feel like you cannot help it. Sometimes authors say, "No, I don't think that," but maybe they're lying because because we all want our books to be turned into movies or like plays as well. Theater is also great.
Was very fortunate. I covered a literary festival a couple of years ago in Gibraltar, and I met authors who have had their books turned into television. And I asked them that question actually: did you envision? And they a lot of them said no. You just write your book. It depends on your goals and how positive your mind is. Because if you believe your book is good enough to be, or what you're writing is good enough to be adapted onto television or onto a movie screen, the silver screen, then your writing should pay off. I think I do watch a lot of television. I do watch a lot of movies. That's one of my well, movies especially is one of my big hobbies, and I see some of the same stuff written over and over again. So it'll be good to see something very unique, and which is why something like Game of Thrones was such a huge success, because you didn't really see much of that television stuff because it was very different, very unique, and your story would be very unique as well. And I think the question I want to ask you as well: who would you want your lead for your television or your movies?
I will answer that in a moment, but just to go back to your point, I do think that this would be a great moment for Greek myth retelling, um, or a story that follows the women at the heart of Greek mythology, because obviously there's the new Nolan movie coming out soon, The Odyssey, with this amazing cast. There's also a movie with Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche called The Return, which is another adaptation of The Odyssey by director Pasolini. And those are going to be amazing. And I'm so excited for those movies. But I do feel like it would be great to have some female leads as well. Because this has been a very successful trend in literature, in fiction. Like we have proven with books like Madeline Miller's novels or Jennifer Saint's novels or even Clytemnestra that these books can sell a lot, even with female characters at the center, actually because of the female characters at the center. And so I think this shift needs to happen in TV as well. And it could happen in the next few years. So fingers crossed. In terms of the actors and actresses I would cast, I think I used to think of Clytemnestra as Florence Pugh. I love Florence Pugh. She, from Midsummer, Little Women, Black Widow. And she is great because she's very poised and she has that authority to her, that power, but she can also be quite vulnerable on screen, which I think she's very great at conveying pain. And I just feel like this is a feature that an actress who plays Clytemnestra would need. And then I thought of Helen as Emma Corrin from The Crown, but also Lady Chatterley's Lover. I really loved Emma Corrin in Lady Chatterley's Lover, and has this look that is feminine and masculine that would work so well because Clytemnestra and Helen were Spartan women, and Spartan women were trained like men. The girls trained just like the boys, and they had this kind of masculine look to them, which would be perfect. And then obviously very beautiful because Helen of Sparta, Helen of Troy, she was the face that launched 1,000 ships. So and then for Babylonia, there's this actress that I'm obsessed with. She's not hugely famous. Her name is Amita Suman, and she played the character of Inez Gaffa in the fantasy series Shadow and Bone, adapted from the Liberdugo books. And she has this beauty that kind of draws you in, but she's also very in the fantasy series, she's a climber, which would work so well because Semiramis is also a climber in Babylonia. So I kind of kept thinking about her while I was writing Babylonia. And then for Ninus, who's one of the leads in in Babylonia. He's one of the three main perspectives. Yeah. He's the king of the Assyrian Empire. I had this obsession with Charles Melton, who he's not like hugely famous, but he recently did a movie called May December with Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore, directed by Todd Haynes. And I love Todd Haynes because his movies are so controversial and challenging. And he played this character. It was a very difficult part because he played the part of this real life boy who had a relationship with a woman more than 20 years his senior. And he just conveyed the complexity of those feelings in such an incredible way. I was obsessed. I am obsessed with Charles Malpa. So yeah, I thought of him for Ninus. But yeah, I'm going to stop here because then the list goes on.
Obviously, if they approach you, you want to approach those actors and actresses and say, hey, listen, this is what we're doing. But I also like the idea of having the story told from a female perspective rather than through the male, because I think that's not been told. I think that'd be very different to have on screen and television. And powerful women are very important to have, and the story to be told anyway. So I think that would be really, really interesting to have. And you're saying you were writing another book, so obviously congratulations, you're writing your third book.
Thank you.
So what's the expectation in terms of times of finishing that and for it to be released, would you say?
Yeah, so I actually just signed my contract for that.
So congratulations.
Really thank you. It's really exciting. And this is my favorite book I've ever written. And this book is historical fantasy. So it is still set in history, Renaissance, Italy, which is a setting that I have been obsessed with for a very long time. But it has little snippets of fantasy and magic here and there. And so don't think about those big epic fantasy novels like Game of Thrones or, Prior of the Orange Tree, which are amazing. Like, I love those novels. But this is more, the fantasy is kind of smaller, and the magic comes from real historical events. So it is more similar to books like The Familiar by Lee Bardugo or Babel in that respect. And yeah, so I am writing it now, and it's going to be released early 2027. Yeah, right now I'm just deep in drafting mode. Like, as soon as we finish this interview, I'm going to go back to my little desk and just type away. But I'm loving this book. I'm having so much fun with it. And there will come a time when I'll be stressed.
No, I'm sure.
This is not the time, and I'm just enjoying the process. So I feel really blessed.
You've got this coming up. Would you still want to be doing more travel writing, traveling itself? Is that still on the plans, or is it not going to be possible with your workload?
I would love that. And I feel like that will need to happen, between one book and the next, because when I'm working on a novel, especially in the first stages of drafting, I am just so focused on the story that I cannot really enjoy the best parts of travel writing. But I would definitely love to go back to it in the future. It is something that just gave me so much joy. So,
well, congratulations. It's amazing to hear that you're onto your third book. For people that haven't read Babylonia and Clytemnestra, you can buy it in all good bookstores and online as well.
I just love this interview. It was so great to see you again. I was looking forward to this. Thank you so much for having me.
I was really, really, really looking forward to it. Well, Costanza Casati, thank you so much for your time, and I'll speak to you very soon.
Thank you, Shabs. Thank you so much.
Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button to never miss an episode. Watch all my previous episodes from the show. You can follow me on all my social media platforms. You can also become a patron of the channel and support me on my journey in producing more of these shows. The link is in the description. That's it for Take a Wonder with Shebs. Hope to see you all very soon. Until next time, bye for now.